sound better.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to our second lesson on Branding 101. Our second lesson of this series is going to be how to build your brand and how to create a visual experience. So when building your brand, it's important to remember, first, is it genuine? Can't stress this enough, guys. If it's not you, it's never going to be really successful. It has to feel natural. Otherwise, you're not going to really want to even do it either. You're going to have to pretend to be someone you're not. Second thing, is it profitable? You know, while you're a musician, you're also a business person. You're here to make some money, you know? You need to understand if your brand offers avenues of revenue. Can you profit off your live shows? Can you profit off your merch? Can you profit off your music to the point where you don't need to work any other jobs? And is your brand tellable? Let's say you're sitting down for a serious interview at BBC Radio and they want to know your story. How can you tell your story to the point where people are like, wow, man, I love that story. It's, you know, I may have heard it, but the way you say it or the way that you portray it is unique. This is huge too, guys. And lastly, is it relatable? Do people feel connected to you? This is important when you're understanding who your target audience is who do you represent and how do you represent them? Do you represent the sad boys? You know, do you represent the bass heads? Do you represent the more misunderstood, the revolt? These are things to really dial in on. And these are the 4 things that we're going to be breaking down in this lesson. So we're going to get into each one a little more. But these are the kind of the focal points that I want to talk about today. So let's try this first. Let's grab a piece of paper and in the center of the paper, write one word that describes your sound. Start making branches off that word and describe ways that they make you feel. For example, if your music is happy, you could say confident. For example, I like to make melodic dubstep. So I would probably put emotional in the middle of mine. And I could branch out and I could say sad. I could say happy. I could say intense, you know, crying, hands in the air moment, big drops, you know, try to get as in-depth with this as you can. See how big you can really make your web. This is important too. This will really help you dial in to see what kind of energy that you think you give off, and then you can have a better understanding of what kind of direction you want to go. When you're finished, let's look back on all these words, and all of these are words that you can relate back to your brand and emotions, and even your social media. And another important thing too, if you're writing this and you're like, man, I don't know, this doesn't feel right. This is a really good sign that you need to start over. Rip up the paper and start over again. And if your music doesn't match any of the words that you wrote, that's okay. That's totally okay. That's a really good sign that maybe one of them is lacking. So now that we've talked about a lot of the emotional side, we've talked about how brands make you feel. How does it make you feel? What kind of vibes do we get? Let's get more specific with this. So this is a chart that I've laid out. If you want to, you can screenshot this or print it off or download it. This is totally up to you. You don't have to use this, but this can be kind of like a way for you to really get more specific on what your brand kind of looks like. You start at the top with your brand identity. This can be where you put happy, sad, emotional, melodic, whatever you said. And on the left, you can see what does your brand stand for. Now, while your brand identity might be happy, your brand might stand for equality, justice, good vibes, family, community. And who is your audience? This is something that you need to get really specific on. For example, if you make melodic music, your audience is probably young teenage men and women from the ages of 16 to 25. Those are probably your prime consumers. What does your music say? What are your live shows like, and how do you portray yourself? Do you live your brand? Are you a good person who makes really nice music and has fun, amazing live shows, and most importantly, you're a good person around other people? Your brand will have cohesiveness because not only is your music nice and happy, your shows are good vibes, but you're a good person as well. And when your target audience is, if you know who they are, how do you plan to approach them and how do you plan to include them? We'll talk more about our fans in lesson 3, but this is something to keep in mind as we move forward. So when you're building your brand, it's also important to understand these 4 focal points right here: music, your properties, your visuals, and your merch. Music, a great brand and good music is great, but a great brand and great music is going to be timeless. And I talked about that a lot in our first lesson. I want to bring that back again because I'm going to be drilling that home a lot. I can talk to you all day about how to build a great brand, but if your music doesn't match, then you're not gonna really see the success that you want, and you're gonna work harder and not smarter. And like I said, there's no rush on this. You don't need to get it out today. You don't need to get it out tomorrow. Take your time. Great things happen over long stretches of time. Now let's get into your properties. Do you own the @ to your name? And do you own your domain name as well as your copyrights? Your social media handles and having a website, so important and such a good professional look to your brand. Having these off and not looking the same is going to be a little weird, but we're going to touch more on these later. And visuals, do you have custom artwork for your covers and logos, or do you make them all yourself? Either or works, as long as it's cohesive. And do you have a visual experience, and is it authentic? When I think of this, I think of guys like Seven Lions or Illenium. Their visuals at their live shows, they tell stories almost, and you're engaged the whole time. Whereas if you go see someone like Excision, it's just chaos. But that guy has the best visual lighting in the game, hands down. No one beats Excision. He owns it. And your merch, and if you sell merch, how much do you sell, and how often do you sell them? And are your taxes and affairs in order? I know that if you're selling merch through a website, you have to pay a certain tax, and it can get expensive just to keep it up there. So if you're doing it through Venmo, this is good. But if you're making serious money off it, it's understand that you have to make sure that no one's going to come after you. So when you're selling merch, make sure that you know how much and how often you're going to do it. And we're going to touch on all 4 of these later. So getting specific. First things first, music. Think of music as your brand's brain. It should be the controlling factor in everything. Everything your brand is should be coherent with your brand. Your brand should revolve around your music. Your music should not revolve around your brand. Make sure your music is head first. Your time put in will always equal good results. This is huge, guys. Huge again. And I'm curious now that I've said this multiple times, can you think of brands who don't meet this criteria? Can you think of brands that don't have good music, but have incredible brands and it's shown them success? Can you think of I can probably think of a few in my head. I'm not going to say any names because I don't want to offend anybody watching this, but if you could think of these, personally, when you think about this, also think, is this timeless? Are people going to look back on this person and think, wow, they were one of the greatest artists of our generation? Probably not. Now, your properties. If your artist name is, let's say, DJ Angel, your @ better not be Big Smoothie. I'm never going to be able to find you, and it's not going to make any sense. If your DJ name is DJ Angel, make sure your @ is DJ Angel, or anything you can possibly get close to it. Consistency is always key with your properties. So start on this now. Start researching all the @ you want across all your platforms and see how compatible you get. If an underscore or a parentheses is going to be your difference, that's not a big deal. Maybe one extra letter, that's not too bad. Just try to get them all as close as possible. See which one you can get close to all the same. And consider buying your domain as well as submitting your copyright and trademark information. Now, having a website as an artist, very important. I highly recommend this. Go and buy your domain. They're not expensive. You can build a website for free. You can have a whole day out of it. It's really fun. I highly recommend you do this. And copyright and trademark information, while this is important, if you're just starting out, it's not the biggest thing in the world. This is something you can worry about more as you get bigger and your brand starts to grow and you become more powerful. And what's a really funny story is I know that deadmau5 didn't trademark his name until Disney tried to sue him for using the Mickey Mouse head. For they thought that he was using the Mickey Mouse head as like a way of slander, but he got around it and he still gets to do it. So that was the only time he had to trademark it, when deadmau5 was massive. So that kind of stuff is a little different, but if you own it now, it'll probably save you a lot of stress in the long run. Your visuals. Spending $300 to record your song, but $15 for cover work, it can look really insignificant. Now, if maybe wonky, kind of cheap cover work is your brand, that's a different story. But if you imagine someone like Excision having photoshopped $15 cover work, I don't know, it wouldn't look the same, and you wouldn't get the same energy from it. Visual learning is just as important as hearing. 65% of the world's population consider themselves visual listeners. And in a world where everyone is moving, everyone is so busy, and attention spans are at the bare minimum right now, you're going to want to give them something worth their while to look at while they listen to your music. Start researching graphic designers that you enjoy, or even start to create your own. If you do it already, that's awesome. That's such a great skill to have. Saves you a ton of money in the long run. And when you're researching graphic designers and you start to get the vibe that you like, consider this for your live shows too. Are your graphics intense, or do they kind of tell stories? Do your album cover works do they work well with each other? Is it all kind of a narrative, or is it more of just in your face, beautiful, here for the chaos kind of vibe? This is really important too, is finding your budget and sticking to it. Don't go spend $700 on an album cover because you think it'll be dope. You can probably get a great better work for a lot less, but also don't be cheap. Make sure that you know what your budget is and you stick to it. That's really important too, and you stick to it. And finally, make sure that it looks good and it feels good. You'll never regret 100%. You'll never regret giving your best. When you have good looking cover work with a good feeling song, you're going to feel 100%. You're going to feel amazing about it. And that's really important too, guys, is if it looks good, you're going to feel good. So with our merchandise is the number one way to spread word of mouth without actually ever being there. You'll have someone wearing your jersey or someone wearing your tank top, and someone could be like, wow, man, that is really cool. What is that? And they'll say, dude, it's this guy that I follow. I love him so much. He makes such great music, and this is like the comfiest tank top I've ever had. You need to understand that when you're designing your merch, you have to decide how much you want to make, when you want to do it, and what designs you want to do. This is really important too, because you really got to understand that making too much merch from the wrong person at the wrong time can be a financial blow to you. Getting t-shirts made in November in the middle of winter and trying to sell them all for $30 a pop, it's probably not going to do you very good. You have to understand your market, and you have to understand how much you want to sell and how much of a return you're going to make. This is really important too when it comes to our finances, because if we're doing merchandise, the point of this is to see an income. This is really important, and you have to make sure that you can afford it. So these 4 points that we just talked about: music. We need to write every day. If you're going to do anything every single day about your brand, it should be writing music. This is your work and this is your love. Your music is the brainchild. Everything should revolve around it. Your properties. You need to start now. The sooner the better, and start doing your research on brands and ownerships. This is really important, guys. Having your cohesive brand across all your socials, it'll make fans find you very easily and keep the attention span very low. Your visual work. Don't be cheap. Don't pay too much, but don't be too cheap. Having good work is very important. Your listeners are very visual. You have to make sure you appeal to that. And your merchandise. Remember, merchandise is a great way to connect to your fans and make good money, but knowing your finances beforehand is key. It's a good investment. So, our recap. How do you make people feel? How does your brand make people feel? This is very important when marketing on all aspects. You need to do your research. Know how much your merch is going to cost, how much visual work is going to cost, how much your and your domain is going to cost. How can you budget for this? Who else owns the rights, and how can you get them away from them? These are really important if you want to build this brand. And if these are things that you might not have control over, this is a possibility you could even rebrand. And get specific and be very honest. Make sure that you know exactly what you want to do and how you want to do it. Having a game plan as you create and before you go live is huge. It'll make everything flow so much easier compared to as if you're playing catch up. And that's the end of lesson 2, guys. We've really gotten in and talked about a lot about what makes a brand and how it makes it emotional and how it can all come together and how we build one. In our next lesson, we're going to be talking about our number one source of income, our fans, and how we can appeal to them.